you have now taken that experience, built it to your own business. And I know you've grown your own portfolio, but more importantly, you've helped so many other people get started. I know with your shop, you've helped over 1,000, or you've done over 1,025 deals just last year. So explain to me a little bit more about what it is you do with the short-term shop and how exactly you're helping other people get invested.
Absolutely. So on about our second short-term rental investment, we realized that there weren't any agents in the space that could answer questions like, what should this property make? Or how do I find a cleaner? Or does it really matter that this driveway is kind of steep? Weren't really anybody who could give us, or there wasn't anybody who could give us any answers on that. So I was hating my job and, waiting for my manager, who did not like me, to bestow upon me a $10,000 raise at some point in my career. And I got passed over for a promotion, which thank God I did. And it was that was kind of the catalyst of like, okay, I'm going to go do something else. And so I got my real estate license, bridged that gap in that market, and became that agent that could answer those questions. And that eventually became the short-term shop. We have offices in 10 markets right now, bringing at least 4 more online in Q1 and 2 of this year. And basically what we do, so we're real estate agents and we only work with short-term rental investors, whether they're buying or selling. And with our buyer clients, for those people who use us as their buyer's agents in those markets, we have a whole back-end training program where we teach them everything they need to know, which is a lot less than it used to be, by the way, with all the automation tools. So we teach them everything they need to know about remote self-management so that they can manage their property remotely. Even if they have a full-time job, it's really only about 30 minutes a week if you have one property. So we teach them everything from how to set up your Airbnb and VRBO listing to teaching you how to use all the property management software that will make your life a million times easier than ours were when we started, all the way down to helping them source their local cleaners, handymen, boots on the ground that they'll need to run their property. So basically, if you buy a property with us, we teach you all of that while you're still under contract. So by the time you close with us, you're ready to turn the key and go and make money.
I love it. I mean, to your point, you're talking about taking those lessons you've learned, systematizing it, and then on the agent side, being able to educate those buyers so they can be ready to go with a leg up on how to get started and be successful out of the gate. You mentioned that you've done, or I mentioned, I guess, that you've done over 1,000 deals last year and you have 4 offices and looking to expand. How do you manage that scale? Because I think one of the things is, when you're having success and trying to scale, you run into a lot of challenges. So talk to me a little bit more about how you're managing the scale and the success that you're having with the short-term shop.
Yeah. We actually have 10 offices. We're bringing 4 more on. So
got it. Okay.
A little backwards. So honestly, the hardest part about scaling is finding the right people and enough of them. So our biggest problem right now is a bottleneck we've got it figured out on our agent side, but we also have a mortgage company called The Mortgage Shop that we just have gotten really successful really quickly. So it's like trying to make sure we have enough people to service everyone right out of the gate, because the growth has outpaced our projections for growth, which is a good problem to have. So really just finding good people is the hardest part about managing that scaling.
Makes a lot of sense. When you are, I guess, when a buyer is looking, or even a seller, I guess, from that standpoint, when a buyer or a seller is looking for an agent, what's the benefit of working with an agent who has a specialization in short-term rentals versus your traditional residential agent?
Really, just because that asset class is 1,000% different buying a primary home and buying a short-term rental. There's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. Zoning and regulations are the main factors. So for example, a few years ago, back when we were living in Nashville, and I did have an office in Nashville. And as I mentioned, Nashville has some really significant zoning laws when it comes to short-term rentals. I would have 1 to 2 random new clients call me a week and say, "Hey, I found this really great property. It's $950,000. It'll be a great short-term rental. I want you to make the offer on it for me." And I would look at it and I would say, this is not zoned for short-term rental. So if you call the wrong agent and want to make an offer like that, and they're not experienced in short-term rentals, you might have just made a $950,000 investment and not be able to use it for what you thought you were going to be able to use it for. And same thing, like what I'm doing right now is I'm buying some apartment buildings in the Midwest, and I would not go to, let me actually turn the tables. If you want to buy apartment buildings in the markets that I work in, I'm not the agent for you, because that's not what I do. I don't live in that world. I don't have that experience, but I do have, experience in 1,025 short-term transactions last year. So we saw it all last year. There's a lot that can happen and go sideways and go wrong in that many transactions. And we saw it all. So you definitely want to have an experienced agent in the asset class that you are buying in, because A, just the knowledge of the zoning, but B, just knowing what to do when things go sideways, because things go sideways in real estate. So you just want someone who's used to navigating the same course that you're about to embark on. So you just want to make sure that you've got somebody that really knows what they're doing there.
Yeah, I mean, having people with the education is key, right? They've got to have the experience. You want them to help you navigate that experience and that process so that you can lean on their experience so you don't make mistakes and you don't have these challenges. So I just think that's absolutely critical. Work with the people who know that space. And if you do that, that will alleviate a lot of headaches. So you definitely want to make sure you are working with the right people on top of, kind of what you're doing with the short-term shop and educating those buyers on what that process is. You also host a podcast. Talk to me about the podcast. What made you start that show, and what kind of lessons do listeners get when they listen to your show?
Yeah. So I started the podcast about this time last year. And we focus on interviewing either short-term rental owners or people who have businesses in the space, like furnishing companies and CPAs and attorneys and things like that. The goal is education. And I found that, even with our clients coming through the door, sometimes they're buying more short-term rentals in other markets that aren't with us and things like that. So being able to just educate people, because a lot of people think like, oh, I could never be a real estate investor, whether it's short-term or long-term or what have you. They're like, oh, that's for somebody else. That's not for me. And it can be for you. You can do it. And, Luke, my husband, and I, when we started, we just thought, these people are doing it. Why can't we do it? Why not us? So I want other people to realize you absolutely can do it. I went from making $37,000 a year to having 105 properties in 5 years. If I can do it, you can do it. I'm not special. And I want other people to realize that too.
Yeah, I mean, the show is called The Short-Term Show. We'll make sure we link to that in the show notes there. So please check that out. And in addition to the podcast, you wrote a book. So you are absolutely crushing it with educating your audience. So the book is Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. What kind of insights are in this book, and what sparked you to write it?
Well, so it's kind of a primer into just where to start with short-term rentals. So if you think, I think I might want to do that, we start at the beginning, how to identify a market, how to build your buying team, financing options. And then the second half of the book is all about the remote self-management, analyzing properties. Well, that's in the first half, analyzing properties, things like that. Just everything you need to know when you first have that thought of, okay, I think I want to do this. And I was actually sparked the idea because Bigger Pockets Publishing, I'd been on the Bigger Pockets podcast a couple of times and had spoken at a few of their conferences. And they were like, hey, we think the time's right for a short-term rental book, and we think you're the person to write it. And I was like, absolutely, sold. Let's do it.
Love it. Congrats on that book. It's available on the Bigger Pockets Publishing. We'll make sure we link to that as well. Now, Avery, we talked a lot about short-term rental resources to get started. I want to ask a couple of common questions that I tend to get, or that I at least understand when I'm talking to other investors, right, when it comes to short-term rentals. The first one is, we get kind of the destination short-term rental, right? Smoky Mountains, Florida, those really, touristy locations. We get that makes sense. But do short-term rentals work in non-destination places? So I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, for instance. Like, are you coming across investors who are having success investing in short-term rentals in some of these secondary or tertiary markets?
Yeah, it can absolutely work. And I am seeing investors that are successful in those markets. I personally stick to the regional drivable destination markets. But with metro markets, they can absolutely work. We have plenty of clients who own properties in metro markets who are doing awesome. The thing about metro markets is short-term rentals are kind of a new thing as of the past 10 to 15 years, whereas the regional drivable vacation destinations, typically short-term rentals have been around for a long time. Like I'm sitting in Destin, Florida right now, and my grandmother came to Destin every year since 1949, I think, and stayed in vacation rentals. So these are areas where the rules were established. They're like very well established. They were established a long time ago, decades and decades and decades. They're kind of woven into the fabric of the local economies now. So you don't have to worry about buying a property and then something changing with the rules to where you can't do it anymore. Metro markets, it's a new thing as of really the inception of Airbnb and VRBO. Typically, people going to Cincinnati up until 10 years ago were all staying in hotels. Now people are buying Airbnbs, taking market share away from the hotels, which the hotels don't like. Also, primary homeowners don't necessarily want transient properties next door to them either. So those two things, the hotels and the primary homeowners who are not dependent on that vacation and tourism income, can make for some difficult navigation in terms of short-term rental regulation. So I find metro markets to be a little bit more volatile than the regional drivable vacation markets. So that's what I stick to. But I do know plenty of people who are making great money doing that. And that's just not something that I personally want to deal with. But if it's something that you're comfortable with, maybe because it's in your backyard, then I'd say go for it.
And with that noted, right, you talked about the hotel industry, zoning laws, residential owners. How do you foresee the impact of zoning and legislation moving forward? Because there's obviously been a lot of debate and a lot of policy pushes from those interested parties. So how do you see that playing out, and what should investors keep in mind as they're looking to invest?
In metro markets, I would say they're probably going to land somewhere in like a small specific zoning area that allows for short-term rentals, because at the same time that other owners, primary homeowners and hotels don't really want them there, the city is probably making money off of occupancy taxes. So they don't want to say you can't have them completely, although some cities have said that. So I think it'll probably land somewhere there's some small geographical areas that allow it.
Makes a lot of sense there. When you talk to investors, I mean, you get people who are starting out. I imagine many of them are doing this for the first time. What are some of the biggest questions or the most common questions you get about investing in short-term rentals?
The main one is, how do I do this with a day job, or how do I do this when I can't drive over there and look at the property? For sure, those two.
And how do you respond to that?
So for the day job one, I say, the way that technology is right now with the property management software, most of the responses to any questions you might have are automated within you set those up when you get your property set up on the listing sites. So you're not going to have to answer a lot of questions unless somebody asks something very specific. Like, is it probably going to interrupt your dinner at some point? Yes, but you're making a lot more money than if it were a traditional long-term. So there does have to be some give and take there. But it's absolutely doable with a 9 to 5. It takes, maybe 30 minutes a week, not a big deal. And then in terms of needing to drive by, the example that I give people is, if a toilet breaks in my cabin in Tennessee, I'm going to do the exact same thing as if the toilet behind me in my office breaks. I'm going to call somebody because I don't know how to fix a toilet. Like, I have no business going and trying to do that. And even if you take that to a more severe scale, like at what scenario makes sense for you to go insert yourself into that situation? A fire? No. A medical emergency? Absolutely not. There's really no scenario that would require you to have to be there. And as a matter of fact, for like insurance and liability purposes, you probably don't need to be there. Because if somebody falls down your stairs because they're hammered and you say, I'm sorry, you're in a way admitting fault as if it were your fault that they were hammered and fell down your stairs. So you kind of have to like stay hands off. And when I explain it to people that way, they're kind of like, oh yeah, you're right. I guess I don't need to drive by it. So that's what I typically say.
Yeah. And I think too, your example of like, you're like me. So I'm not I'm not Mr. Handyman. I would pretend to be, but I've messed up enough stuff in the homes I've lived in to know that is not my God-given talent. So yeah, something breaks, I'm calling somebody, no matter if it's 5 feet away from me or 500 miles away from me. So we're definitely calling somebody else to come help and fix it. And I would say for that person who really wants that comfort of seeing what's happening or keeping your eye on it, you can hire people locally. I mean, if you have someone locally, whether it be an agent or an investor, or even you could just post on Facebook or Craigslist or Bigger Pockets and probably get somebody to just go by, walk around the property, take pictures, do a video, something like that. If you absolutely feel like you need to see something real time, if you will, of what's happening, there are ways around that. So that shouldn't be the thing that holds you back from investing. Avery, I know that while we've talked all about short-term rentals, that is not the only thing you invest in. So you're invested in other asset classes. I want to know why. Why do you expand beyond short-term rentals if you are so savvy and knowledgeable about this sector?
Yeah. So for me, our goal was never to just build this fleet of short-term rentals and that be it. We started with a long-term rental. And the reason we bought a short-term was so that we could scale more quickly. I guess we didn't realize exactly how much money we would be making on the short terms, but that goal didn't change because we started making money on the short terms. We were using the strategy of using the short terms as cash flow turbochargers to go buy other things. And that's still the strategy today. Our strategy worked. So I'm a big believer in having a diverse portfolio. I'm not saying, go be looking at a short-term rental over here and single families over here and multifamilies over here all at one time, because you'll never buy anything. Do one thing at a time. But it is good to have a diverse portfolio. COVID is a really great example of that. So when COVID first hit and nobody knew what was going to happen, in 2020, we thought, oh crap, there go the short terms. The hammer's finally dropped. At least we have all these long terms to support us while the short terms go down. And it actually ended up being the opposite thing. So 2 weeks of shutdowns and the doors blew off of our short-term rentals. We were getting higher prices per night than we'd ever seen. It was insanity. And we made so much money just off of people who were dying to get out of their houses, but didn't want to get on a flight, didn't want to go to a metro area, didn't want to fly. So you didn't want to go anywhere. They had to fly, basically. And it was actually the long-term rentals that we had to worry about with the eviction moratorium. So what we assumed was wrong, but either way, whichever way the pendulum swung, we were covered. If the short terms go down, we got the long terms. If the long terms go down, we got the short terms. So for us, the diverse portfolio thing has worked out really well. And using the short terms as cash flow turbochargers to buy other things. And we're not done buying short terms by any means. Like we bought 2 last year. So we're kind of always, keeping an eye out for a new short term, but our focus is more on the multifamily side right now, which there are no deals. There are 0 deals. But we're working on it. But if a good short term deal pops up, we'll always buy it. So.
I love the fact that you talk about a diversified portfolio, because it's easy to get caught up in, your way is the right way, or you found this strategy that works and you're super excited about it. So that's all you're going to do. And I'm big on going deep, but on the same note, the point is to build a diversified portfolio that is recession resistant. And part of the way you do that is invest in different asset classes. So if you're killing it with single families, look at maybe adding some multifamily or some short-term rentals or self-storage to your portfolio. If you've got all multifamily, great. Why not think about getting some short-term rentals or something else that is a little bit more diversified? And the point is, again, just to continue to build a well-rounded portfolio, focus on what you know for sure, but it doesn't mean you should be completely oblivious to some of these other asset classes. And that's why we wanted to talk to you, even though that short-term rental is not exactly our forte. It's something that we're always interested in. You mentioned for yourself, you are looking at multifamily, particularly in the Midwest. As you're looking at multifamily deals, what's your criteria? Are you looking at specific markets, or what have you done to kind of formulate a criteria for yourself?
So my criteria is such a moving target because, 10 years ago, you could say, I want it to be this cap rate and that's it. And that's what I want it to be. But now we're looking at things like, okay, what can I make this? Like, yes, the cap rate is like 2 or 3 right now, because everything is, but how how difficult is it going to be to get this where it needs to be? Like we bought something in this random town in Nebraska, which don't buy things in random towns. It was really near where my husband grew up. So he knew it. It was like, the rival high school town. And it was 26 units. I think it was like half rented. But that was something that like, okay, great. It's half rented. We know we can get the rents up to here and we can go in there and renovate it immediately and get it where it needs to be. But like right now we're looking at a 50 unit and it's kind of the same thing. The rents are really low as it stands right now. It's losing money. But it's, I think 47 of the 50 units are rented. So that would take several years, or even if we did 5 rent raises a month, that would still take a couple of years to get through to like actually start making money. So I would prefer something that if it does have a low gross annual income or low cap rate or whatever, I'd prefer it to be less rented because I'm very comfortable with our management companies and getting people in there. But what I'm not comfortable with is having to wait years to make it do what I need it to do. So I don't have like a set criteria. I just need to see that where's the value now? What's the income now? What can I get it to? And can I get that to a number where the cash on cash return makes sense to me? So I'm spending this much money. It's going to be this much for the rehab. Is that number at the end of the day worth it to me for me to put this much money down? Yes or no. And there's not necessarily a specific number or percentage point that for me makes me say yes, because there's a lot of things like, yes, numbers are very important and you do have to analyze and we do have spreadsheets, but there's also a lot of intangible assets in terms of figuring out what things could make if they were slightly changed.
Yeah, I think the most important thing when investing is the business plan. It's easy to get caught up in underwriting a deal, slapping the numbers into a spreadsheet, seeing what it spits out and making a go or no go decision off of that. But the business plan is so critical. Like you said, I mean, the current cap rate could be 2 or 3%, or it probably could be losing money depending on, the current occupancy and things like that. But it doesn't necessarily show what the opportunity could be if you go in with a certain business plan. So I would implore anyone, no matter if you're doing short-term rentals, multifamily, whatever, make sure you're looking at the opportunity and the business plan of a deal, not just plugging in the existing NOI and seeing whether or not you're going to get a 8 or 9%, cap rate or return. You definitely want to make sure you understand what the business plan is. Last thing, Avery, before we go to a round of insights, we've talked a lot about the business that you have. We've got your book that we'll make sure we link to the show notes. If people want to reach out to you, I know you've got your website, theshorttermshop.com. So we'll make sure we link to that. But what else would you say for someone who has been on the fence, listening to our conversation right now, somewhat interested in short-term rentals, or at least maybe interested in talking or learning more about it? What advice would you give them to maybe take that next step?
I would say read my book, check out our YouTube channel. There's lots and lots of good information on there, and just educate yourself as much as you can, especially about the market that you would like to buy in. And then, I have learned I've learned my best lessons by doing and learning as I go. So just get out there and find an agent and pull the trigger on something.
All right, let's jump into the round of insights. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
So I was fired as a real estate agent by a client one time. I was really trying to still be, when I first got my license, I was like, I'll call me for all your buying and selling needs. I felt that going the short-term rental route, even though I was getting the most amount of clients in that asset class, I just felt like I was going to be pigeonholing myself if I said, okay, I'm a short-term rental girl. I did not want to do that. And it took a friend's parents, so a friend whose parents were moving to Nashville, sent them to me, and they ran me all over Middle Tennessee, 12 hours a day, 3 weekends in a row, and then fired me because I didn't know where to find the serial number on a $50,000 mobile home. And, I just closed like $5-6 million worth of short-term rentals that quarter. And on my way home, I was like, I I'm not the nowhere to find a serial number on the mobile home girl. That's not I need to just stick to what I'm actually making my money in, what I'm good at, which is the short-term rentals, and not trying to do all this residential stuff because I don't like it. I'm not good at it. I would rather work with investors who, they're looking at numbers and rentability and not like, oh, this house is great and it's a really great deal, but I don't have enough room for, my pit bull rescue farm in the backyard. Like that, I can't, I can't, I would just, it's easier to just be like, here's the numbers. This is how much it's going to make, yes or no, than like, oh, I don't like the paint color. So being fired from that after having spent so much time was really the failure that caused me to like fail forward and focus on and niche down on short-term rentals. So definitely that.
Was the pit bull rescue farm a real example or just something you're throwing out there?
No. So I did have a client one time that was actually a short-term rental deal, but they didn't want to ride in the car with me because I think they had like 5 or 6 pit bull rescues that they drove around with them everywhere. And so I remember showing them this amazing deal that was like probably $50,000 under market. It was going to make great money. It was going to be like a 60% cash on cash return. Everything about it was perfect, but there wasn't room for their pit bulls. And I was like, but that doesn't matter because you're not going to be living here. Why do you need that? You have room for them at home. So that one I always kind of use as an example because it's like, kind of ridiculous.
Yep. All right. Well, there you go. All right. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Cozy for me, because for those of you who don't know, it's like a family scheduling app. So you can merge your calendar with your spouse's calendar and your kids' calendar. So you know what everybody has going on at all times. That is a lifesaver over here.
Give me the book you recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Ooh, recommended or gifted the most. I think my husband's a big book gifter too. I think Extreme Ownership was the most gifted in the Carl house in 2021.
All right. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Waking up early, 4 a.m.
Ooh, that's early.
Yeah. My kids wake up at 6. So it's the only time.
Give me your number one insight for short-term investing.
So you're never going to find a property that's necessarily going to perfectly fit in a spreadsheet, like in multifamily, fits in a spreadsheet really nicely. Short-term rentals, the success of a property is more dependent on how you manage it than necessarily the amenities of the property itself. So you kind of have to keep that in mind, that short-term rental investing and analyzing is very much a range. Those numbers are a little bit fuzzy as compared to fitting really, really nicely in a spreadsheet.
All right. You are in Destin, Florida. Great city, right by the waters and sunshine all day long. As we're recording this in the winter, I'm sure a lot of people wish they were there with you. And maybe it's a great time to take up one of those short-term rentals. But nonetheless, give me the best place to grab a bite to eat.
In Destin, definitely Camille's. A lot of people don't know about that one. I probably shouldn't have just said it to a podcast audience because now it's going to be busy. But Camille's in Destin, everything on their menu is amazing.
All right, we will check that out. What kind of cuisine is Camille's?
It's a little bit of everything. So there's definitely some fresh local Gulf shrimp and like whatever the catch of the day is always good. But it's always a little bit of a different thing. Like everybody up and down the coast does like, oh, catch of the day, fried, blackened, or grilled, but they'll do like a curry mahi or something a little bit different than what everyone else does. And then they also have a sushi menu that's really good. And then they have a pizza menu that is also really good. So they're a little bit of everything, but everything I've ever had there is amazing. I would call it just general American cuisine, except for the sushi menu.
All right. We'll definitely put that on the show notes here and check that out next time you're in the Destin, Florida area. Avery, I really enjoyed our conversation. I thought you did a great job just helping us to learn more about short-term rentals, how you got started in building out the systems and processes for your business, and really how you're helping other people scale and grow into this space. You've got a great background in helping people learn about what it takes to be successful, and just some great overall insights there. I also love that you're not limited to just short-term rentals. You're investing in other asset classes, looking at multifamily, and continuing to develop a diversified portfolio. Just something for us to all keep in mind. Make sure we understand what the business plan is and use that to decide whether or not to invest, not necessarily just whether or not the numbers on the spreadsheet look good. Again, for listeners who want to get in touch with Avery, learn more about her, you can check out theshorttermshop.com. And we'll also put links to your YouTube channel, your book, and your podcast in the show notes. Avery, thanks again for coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch and hope you have a great day.
Thanks so much for having me.